my name is Ryan Funk. This is We Stand Together. It is a platform where we invite residential school survivors to share their stories, an archive for future generations and newcomers to learn about these stories so that we have an understanding of the history so that we can move forward through reconciliation.
My name is Lisa Muswagon. I'm a Dakota member of the Muscowequan Nation. I grew up in Winnipeg as well as northern Manitoba, and I would like to take this moment to acknowledge where we are located right now. We are on the Treaty 1 territory, where the Anishinaabeg, the Cree, the Métis, the Soto, they all live in this territory, and we'd also like to acknowledge our visitors on this territory, and we'd also like to welcome our guest for today, who is Geraldine Shingoose, and the community knows her as Gramma Shingoose, and we are so grateful to hear her story.
Good morning. It's so good to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah. So my English name is Geraldine Shingoose. My spirit names are Sky Woman, Northern Lights Woman, and I come from the Bear Clan. And my warrior spirit is Grandmother Turtle. So, and my parents are, I want to acknowledge my family. My parents are Eva and Henry Shingoose. And we come from Treaty 4 territory. I hope I said that right. Yes, I don't speak my language because of the residential school. So those are my parents, and I'll be talking about them later. And it's really important that we acknowledge our families. So I'm a mother of 3, and I have 8 grandchildren, and I have 5 great-grandchildren, so I'm a great-grandma. And I have my Bachelor of Social Work, and I'm retired now. And so I have so much to share today. I'm gonna begin by letting you guys know that I'm a 9-year residential school survivor. I went from September to June, 10 months out of the year, and I didn't go home for the summer holiday, for the spring break or the Christmas break or anything like that. So I attended Muscowequan residential school, and it's based in Saskatchewan. And I don't know if you guys are aware, like some of our First Nations that lived in the western part of Manitoba, we were sent to residential schools in Saskatchewan, like Muscowequan and Gordon's residential school, and Fort Capel and Maryville, so. My sister Darlene attended for 10 years, and my brother George attended for 11 years. And my little sister Connie, she attended 1 year. So there's a big gap between me and my sister Connie. She's 6 years younger than I am. Yeah, so, where do I begin? I've shared my story many a times with the schools and the universities, and I usually share about life before residential school and life during residential school and life after. And today I think I'm just going to speak briefly about how it was before, because it's really important that people know that life before residential school was a very beautiful memory for me, because it was a time where I was with my parents, and I was with my kukum and my siblings, and we were happy. We lived a happy life. We didn't have any electricity or running water or any of those things, because we lived out on the land, it was, and I spoke my language. That's all I spoke, I spoke Soto. I cry because that time was very, it's a beautiful memory for me. I carry it in my heart. I carry, I guess what came later was the federal government. And they took my family away from me. And that was the hardest part for me. When I went to Muscowequan, each time I left them, it'd be really hard. So whenever I went to the school, I always carried that memory of them. I said that night when I'd go to sleep, I'd think about them, and then they would make me feel safe, in my bed, in the dormitory there. So Muscowequan Residential School had the girls' side and the boys' side. But they had different parts of the school. They had the cafeteria, and they had where you went to school, to class, and then you had the senior dormitory. That's where the bigger girls would stay, and then we had the little dormitory. So I spent 6 years of my first in Muscowequan in the little girls' dormitory. And that little dormitory is very traumatic on me. The experience I had during those first 6 years was I lost my language. I was punished for speaking my language. We would have the dentist come in, and he would work on our teeth, and sometimes he wouldn't even freeze us, or, we had this medical exam van come, and they would give us needles, or, just do whatever they wanted to our little bodies. And it's, we experience physical and emotional and mental abuse, and most of all spiritual abuse. And the spiritual abuse was taking away my language and taking away my natural time with my parents and my kukum. And they took that away from me, and they forced me to speak Latin, in church. We had church, and it was run by the Catholic priests and the brothers and the nuns, and we were always praying. When we got up in the morning, we'd pray and kneel by our beds, and then we'd go for breakfast, and then we'd pray. And after breakfast, we'd go to church and pray, and then we would have lunch and pray again. So our day was filled with a lot of praying and kneeling down. I remember going to confession, and we all lined up in the hallway into the church, and we'd have to go talk with the father, the priest. So we go in a cubicle. I don't know if you're aware of confessions, but in a cubicle, the father is sitting in there, and the next one is where you go in. So I would go in, and I'd kneel down, and I would tell him, "Forgive me, Father, for I've sinned." And we had to do that every day, you know. And in my adult life, I come to know that I had to make up lies. Like, you know, I had to lie about my sins, that I made a sin, and then he would say, "I forgive you, my child," and he said, "Go and say the rosary, like, you know, Our Father and the 10 Hail Marys and that." And so I'd go out in the chapel and kneel and say that, and then there was time we could go back to the dormitory. So we were in the classrooms were bad experience, because, like, you know, I would see other children being strapped or punished. I would be punished. The first few years were lots, because that's all I spoke, was my language, and that's all I knew. I didn't know any English, like, and then it was forced into me to learn English. I remember in my grade 3 class, we had a male teacher, and he was very, like, he was a white man, and he had a bald head, and he always wore brown suits, and he had a tie, and he would walk up and down the aisles where the kids where we were sitting, and he'd have his hand, like, you know, in here, and you know, and then, or, like, you know, randomly, like, you know, he would take his hand out of his jacket and he would backhand us, like, in the head, and if we cried, he would hit us again. He'd slap us or punch us. Like, it was mostly in the head area. So that was my grade 3, and then I went home for summer, came back, and he ended up failing all of us in the same class, and we had to go in his class again. So I experienced hearing loss because of the hits and the blows and the punches to my head. That time in residential school is like, as a child, you want to be loved, you want to receive that love, like, you know, as parents, you love your child. But when we were in school, we never received that love. All we received was hate, and they wanted to make us like them. And we were given messages, like, you know, we were stupid, we were savages, we were dirty Indians, we were all those names. So whenever you hear, like, you know, if you hear that as a child growing up, like, you know, for those 9 years, you come to believe those messages, When I came out of residential school, I was ashamed to be Indian, ashamed for being brown. I didn't want to be brown. I tried to act like I was white, because that's what they wanted, And my parents, I looked down on them. I was ashamed of them. I was ashamed of my siblings, because that's what happened to me after all those 9 years in residential school. And then it was later in life that I come to learn that talking to other survivors, like, you know, I met other survivors, and they shared their stories, and I was listening to them, and I was, well, I experienced that, so I would share, and I said, oh my God, like, you know, other people experienced this. Not just me and my siblings and the other kids I went to school with. I didn't know there was other schools across Canada. When I found that out, I was thinking, oh, how did they do that? How could they hurt so many children? And I knew that I wasn't alone. I knew that there was others. And when I'm with survivors, I just really connect with them. We have that connection. Like, you know, it's there. Like our experiences, our connection. And then later on, I didn't know how to be a parent. I had to learn how to be a parent. I had to learn on my own. I had to read books and, you know, you watch Little House on the Prairie and, you know, all those, like the mom and dad, and, like, you know, you try to be like them. But I came out of there like really hurt and ashamed. And I didn't know how to parent. And I noticed myself that I became angry at my children. Like, you know, I would yell at them because that's how they would yell at me to do stuff in the school. And I caught myself. I had to stop doing that. They were little children. I couldn't do that to them, what was done to me. And then I had to unlearn. I had to unlearn what was taught to me. And that is really hard, hey? It's really hard to unlearn all what was shown to you. And, like, you know, it was all those behaviors, those harmful, hurtful behaviors. But I come to connect with my family, my dad and my mom. Like, you know, my dad was a really important connection because he's the one that helped me come out of that hurt, hey, and that pain. And he connected me with ceremony, and, like, you know, he helped me connect with my identity of who I truly am as Anishinaabeg, and I become proud as years progressed, like, you know, and you know what, it wasn't until 2010 that I was really come to love myself. Hey? And it didn't come from, like, my dad, but it came from the youth. Hey? Like, you know, you, Lisa, you, and, like, there's so many inspirational youth out there, and you guys just really inspired me, and I come to see myself as a beautiful brown woman. Hey, and I just love myself today. I just really love myself, and I love my children, I love my family, I love my community, and I love my nation. But most of all, I love the survivors, because I really connect with them. And I think that they need more gatherings for survivors where we can gather and we could share stories and laugh, and because we could really relate to one another. Those are the true ones that know my story, and we can share stories about how we played on the monkey bar and how we were on track and field to get out of the school, and like I joined band to get out of the school, so I played at trombone. Yeah, it was, but I want to share, I guess, like, how I came to share my story, and like in 2015 when the TRC came to a close, I seen Justice Murray Sinclair, and it was a very emotional day, like, across Turtle Island, especially with us survivors, and we were, and they had gathered all the stories from across Canada, and like I did with the TRC, as the survivors, we were given that opportunity to share that independent statements, individual statements. So I remember sharing my individual story at the Forks here in Winnipeg, and we all gathered at the Forks. That was in 2010. And they booked a hotel there, and they had the room set up something like this, and they had tobacco for us, and I just sat in front of that camera and we shared our stories, and it didn't matter how long. And it was the very first time I ever shared my story. In sharing my story, it brought out lots, like it's really hard on us survivors to share our stories physically. Like, after that I had a heart attack, like, because I've been carrying that trauma all those years. And us survivors, we still feel those physical pains from residential school. Like, our backs are sore. Like I have one of the survivors, she limps. She has she limps because she was medically experimented on her leg, like here. They cut, and she showed me her scar. Other ones shared stories, and I'm sharing these stories because they tell me to share them. The other one, she was left-handed, and she was forced. They tied her hand, like, she couldn't use it, and she was forced to use her right hand. Or sometimes when she'd use her left hand, her fingers would, like, they'd pull her finger back. So a lot of survivors, the secondary survivors, share that their parents never shared their story. And their parents had passed on, So it's really important that those stories are protected and kept in a safe place and that. So, but one of the things that we participated in as survivors was the independent assessment process. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, yeah. So it's the individual assessment process when the survivors, the Government of Canada, along with the adjudicator, and I had my lawyer and my support, and we shared our story, like, in a circle. But in that sharing the story, we were questioned. Like, like when I shared my sexual abuse, they said, "Did you tell anybody?" And then I said I couldn't tell anybody. All I knew was Soto. They didn't understand Soto. Like, or if we tried to tell them, they'd shoo us away, or we'd get a strap. Like, it was, and those kind of questions were just really degrading. But in the TRC, like with the individual statement and with the panel statement, I only touched on tip of the iceberg, So, but with the individual assessment process, we described and detailed what happened to us in residential school. It took probably about 3 days to do my story. Like we had to meet. And they had to expedite it because I had a heart attack. So they came to my house and I shared my abuses. So with the individual assessment process, we shared our physical, emotional, psychological abuse and sexual abuse. And we were, after they heard everything, then they would meet, like the federal government and the adjudicator, and make a decision what we would be awarded. And based on the criterias. So I brought these today because, it's called My Records, My Choice. And survivors can go on a government website under My Record, My Choice, and they can request their story, because the federal government's going to be destroying our documents, our stories. They were going to do it in 2022, but they extended it to September 2027. So if these stories, if they're not, and it's up to the survivor, sometimes maybe they just want it gone. But myself, I wanted to get my story because I need Canada, I need the world to know what happened in residential school. They need to know our truth, what happened, in residential school. So I got this copy, and the National Truth and Reconciliation Center here in Winnipeg, or at the University of Manitoba, they get a copy of this too. So my family can go, when I go, they can. Yeah, so I just want to share that there's not too many survivors left. And it's really important that people get out and learn their stories, and a lot of resources out there. And with National Truth and Reconciliation Week coming up, it's been really overwhelming for me. We have a lot of organizations and schools and universities approaching us to come and share our story. But I asked them that they do it in a safe way, and take care of those stories, take care of the survivors. I posted some tips the other day, pay for their parking, have water, have food. We like berries, and then if they gift them tobacco and gift them an honorarium, and don't let them wait, give it on that day. And then just with the National Truth and Reconciliation Week, September 26th to the 30th, you see it out there already, you have people closing their organizations for that day. You have Every Child Matters. You see orange across the city right now, and it brings me comfort seeing that. It's people are get out there to those events that are going to be happening. Hang an orange shirt on your window, those kind of things. But most of all, we want to acknowledge, I guess, the little ones that never made it home from residential school. I want to talk about them because they need to be remembered. They're really, really important to me. I remember in the dormitory there'd be sometimes you'd wake up and, like, you know, the beds would be empty, and you wonder where that student went. And then, but you'd forget about it because the daily life in residential school was always go, go, go. And then come nighttime, you'd see that empty bed, and then I would think that they went home. Hey, they went home to their family, or they ran away, or like in my school, there's 35 burial sites around Muscowequan, and up on a hill they have the graveyard. In 1983, they found 19 unmarked graves up there. And we used to go up there, like when we were in school, they used to take us for walks, and we would go up to that graveyard, and it was really unkept. They didn't take care. It's like they disregarded the children. Right now we have probably thousands of children that aren't named. And I could have been one of them. Could have been one of this, even the students I went to school with. Like, we have communities doing radar searches right now and announcing the numbers that they're finding of unmarked graves. And when I hear those numbers, it really hits home for me as a survivor, because it reminds me of that history. It triggers like all those memories of my life in a residential school. So I just want to honor them, and I asked people to honor them, as they were babies, little children, and they need names. They need names. When 215 came out, some of us survivors went to Kamloops, and we offered our support to the community when the 215. But we stopped in Cowessess, and there was the leadership invited us, and oh, that's so hard. Like, you know, when you walk on those grounds, like, you know, you just really feel a heaviness. Like, you know, I feel a heaviness talking about it right now, and you know, walking through, there's 751. But we sang them songs. The survivors, we sang them songs, drum songs, offered tobacco and burnt smudge, and we had a sharing circle just to share, like, you know, what we experienced. It's important to have that. Today, by me sharing my story, I hope it brings voice to the injustices that happen to the survivors and to the little ones that didn't make it home. I hope and I pray that that there's, like, you know, investigations that are done, like, you know, because we need to name those children. But also we need to, as hard as it is, like even today, like, you know, sharing my story with you was very emotional, very hard. But it brings me comfort knowing that my story is going to carry on. Somebody's going to hear it out there. And I pray that they share my story, you know, with others, people that don't know, you know. A lot of people tell us to get over it, life goes on, but we can't, like, you know, we live with it every day. Not just on National Truth and Reconciliation Day, we live with it every day. You know, when I make my bed, I make my bed every day. That's one of the things that I picked up from residential school. You know, I can't leave my bed undone. It has to be made. And like, you know, so we carry it every day. I just want to close with how I share this with you guys. And this is Gramma, and this is me. And that's my little girl. And that's Muscowequan Residential School there. And the eagle. But Jackie Travers, she's the author of this book. She said, Gramma, what would you tell your little girl? And I told her I would tell my little girl, I love you. And that's what I'm telling her in this picture. And it's a coloring book. It just came out. And I did the foreword. I wrote the foreword for her. She offered me tobacco to do that. And then it shows the beauty of our culture and the beauty of our ceremonies and families. And this is the way we were, eh? Like, you know, before residential school, and we're still like that. Like, you know, our culture, and like, you know, we're going to take our future generation forward. So, and that's what this book is, our resilience. Gramma has resilience. So I just want to close with that. Oh, one more thing. I want to share that I've been invited to go to Stockholm, Sweden. And the people, the Indigenous people over there, the Sami people, they're going to be going through the same what we went through with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So they're just starting that over there. So they want to hear from a survivor that experienced the TRC Commission. And yeah, so I'll be doing that. I'll be on a panel with the Justice Minister that was assigned to the Truth Commissioner. And I'll be sharing my story with the embassy staff too as well. And yeah, I've been sharing my story since the TRC came to a close for the last 7 years. I never thought I'd go international. So I'm going international as I leave October 5th, and I'm back on October the 8th. So, but I'm going to take what we experienced here, but I'm also going to provide really, how do you say it, recommendations and suggestions on how they can move forward in their Truth Commission. Because I went through it, so as a survivor, so they want to hear from a survivor. So that's all I have to share today.
Wow, I couldn't help myself but get emotional. Like as an intergenerational survivor, I can feel your story too, and I'm so grateful and thankful that you were here to share with us the truth, along with your resilience, and we're so excited for you, your trip, and everything that you're coming out with. You know, like you've come a long way. So I just wanted to say thank you for coming on our episode today.
Oh, thank you, Lisa.
Yes, thank you.
This is We Stand Together. Hearing these stories may be difficult and it may make you angry, but they're important to hear so that we can work together, continue to move forward, because this isn't just in the past. Indigenous communities are still facing discrimination, racism, and challenges. Our hope is that by listening to these stories, we can come together and continue on this journey of reconciliation.